Good morning. This is Trevor Pope. I'm with Group 8 working with Tiffany. This morning we're going to present a little bit of information on lexical units, what they are and how they apply to us. Ultimately, I don't know if you all are like me, but I'm reading lexical units, like what the heck's lexical units? And so I actually looked up the definition of lexical, and really all it means is the structure of a language. Um, and that's what it means in this case too, is what makes up the PL/SQL language or programming language, and how do we use it. So really, in other words, it's the words that build the language, and then how you put it all together. In other words, the syntax. So it's don't get hung up on the word lexical. It's just that just means programming language. In this case, the PL/SQL contains, or lexical component contains 4 chunks of information, 4 units if you want to call them that. That's what the text calls them, is units, where we talk about delimiters and identifiers and literals and comments. These are the components of the language that ultimately allow us to program and tell the system what to do with the data that we are going to be working with. In other words, how the code is put together, and how the system then interprets that code and what to do with it. So to work with it, we really have to know what each of these units are and how they work, and become familiar with that. The breakdown of the components, really, you've got delimiters and identifiers, and they are a combination of a variety of things. Delimiters I'll talk about here in a second, but they provide an assignment and associate data. It allows you to concatenate pieces of data. It gives you the comparisons capabilities, allows you to do math and whatnot. So delimiters, don't get too hung up on what that word means. I'll show you an example where I'm sure most of you have actually used delimiters in the past in another program and maybe just not realized it. So in this case, the PL/SQL comes with a lot of those already all that built in. And the identifiers really are the building blocks of the program. It's the keywords that are needed and that are prefaced and put into the code that tell the system what to do with the data that it's manipulating and working with those delimiters, for example. So the identifiers become critical, and those are predefined. You do have the ability to massage some of this stuff, but for the most part, you have to work with what the system is defaulting to, so it knows what to do with those words. You can create variety of identifiers. Depends on how you want to work with it. You can work with the predefined ones, and sometimes you may need to work with customized ones. So depends on how complex you want to get. And then obviously throughout code, a good coder will put comments throughout their code to show the thought process and explain certain key areas in the code, so somebody looking at it can understand how you got to that point. And even as the coder, I know I've gone back a number of times, like, why did I do that? And so having comments in the code help you keep it straight. So let's start with delimiters. You got simple and compound symbols. To illustrate this, so I'm going to pop over to Excel, because delimiters are used a lot in Excel, particularly if you're working with text files or CSV files. And all a delimiter is a symbol that's used in a piece of data that denotes a break in it. So I've actually created a little text file where I've got hello, or comma hello, comma my space my, comma name, comma is Trevor. And then I've got another line of 1 semicolon, 2 semicolon, 3 semicolon, 4 semicolon, 5 semicolon, and then just a regular string statement, hello, my name is Trevor. But Excel's saying, oh, I recognize some delimiting characters in here, such as commas or tabs, and can use those to then separate. If I just simply said no, everything's normal, it would open these up, and each one of these would be in cell A1, 2, and 3 as one piece of string. But in this case, I'm going to say no, I've got some delimited data. So what are my delimiters? Well, I don't have any tabs in there, but there is a semicolon, and you'll notice right away that it separated that one string into separate columns. I've also got some commas, but it didn't change that. And the reason why it didn't change that is because it's assuming it's a text string. So if you take the text string out, it changes to, then it'll recognize that comma as a delimiter and separate each of those pieces of text into a different column. Now my last statement, hello, my name is Trevor, with nothing other than spaces, you can use the space as a delimiter itself. And it recognizes that space as, oh, here's a break in the string, let's take the rest of the data and move it over. So when I open this up, it will separate each of those pieces of data into separate columns. That's how delimiters work. And so in our case, while we're not necessarily needing to take a single string of data or whatever and putting it into separate columns, what we do want to be able to do is recognize where we've got data coming in that needs to be split, such as a string. You can split a string and then concatenate it with another string, for example. A lot of the delimiters so are going to be, as we've shown here, are going to be math related. And that's telling the system that, okay, you've got to do something to a piece of data on the left side of the delimiter and the right side of the delimiter. And these symbols tell the system what to do with it. So don't get too hung up on what a delimiter is. It's just the symbol that's used to define breaks in the data so it knows what to do with each one of those. Identifiers are literally just items and objects in the code. It's the keywords that define constants. It defines it'll define a procedure. It'll define a function, and it gives all the key words within the code of how to manipulate what it is you're trying to do. So select and into and from and then output, and all these things are the identifiers which allow the system to actually process through whatever it is you're trying to do and work with the data that you want to work with. Literals in this case are literally that, literals. They're specific pieces of information, whether it's a string or a number. It can also be Boolean, true or false or null. But literals are just that. It's a piece of data. It's a number. It's specific text, whatever. I don't know how much more you need to explain there, but that's what it is. And comments are, again, just that, comments. There's two ways of putting comments into your code. The double dash that you see here is what would go on a single line comment, so you can just insert something into a single line. And then the slash asterisk allows you to put anything between those slash asterisk symbols, anything between there is commented out of the code, so you can put whatever, and it's considered a multi-line comment. So yeah, the whole unit structure of PLSQL, the language structure, if you want to call it, in this case lexical units, are your building blocks of what you need in order to build your PLSQL program. You've got delimiters, which allows you to differentiate and be selective in your data. Tells the system what piece of data to use and how to use it and what to do with it. Your identifiers are the commands and keywords that are needed within the code to tell the system what to do with that piece of information, which are your literals, in most cases, which are defined by delimiters. Excuse me. And then at the end of the day, you want to make sure you're commenting your code so people looking at it, including yourself, knows what it is you're doing and why it is you're doing it. And hopefully that helps clear up some of these concepts. good luck everyone with the semester, and looking forward to seeing what everybody else is doing.